This podcast is brought to you by sarahraven.com, which is home to everything you need for a truly beautiful and productive garden. You'll also find great and essential gardening kit and stylish, lovely things to have in your house to bring the outside indoors, all inspired by the garden and the house being tied together. There's also plenty of garden inspiration, how-to videos and specialist growing guides, so head over to sarahraven.com today to discover even more. Welcome to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange, the podcast of me, Sarah Raven, and today again Tom Stimpson, who is our head of horticulture at Sarah Raven. Welcome, Tom.
Hello.
We thought it would be fun to have a bit of a sort of catch-up on Tom's garden last spring to plan for next spring. And Tom had the sort of fun opportunity of being on Gardener's World, and he was interviewed basically about small space gardening for spring. So really making the most of a small, compact garden. How big is just recap, Tom, how big is it again, the garden?
It's 10 metres by 7, so really quite tiny.
And Tom has, as he'll tell us, a lot of tables full of lots and lots of pots. And the great thing, of course, is if you have pots in spring, hopefully you don't really need to water. So it doesn't become this sort of maniacal control thing of summer containers, which have to be watered every evening or whatever. It really is more low maintenance because you can plant them in the autumn, the heavens water them through the winter, and even the heavens seem to be watering them through our springs too. So they are something that brings kind of easy joy basically to a small or large garden. But I do feel I'm going to kind of do this more of as an interview of Tom because he is the living expert on this, I think, in my experience. So, Tom, what would you say would be your starting point for, smaller scale bulbs for a smaller scale garden?
Well, I think it's good to have an overall plan of what you want to achieve and the months you want colour to arrive in your garden. So I start quite early on, late summer, maybe once we know our full range, and then I start to plan how I want the garden to look the following spring. So I start with the bigger pots, what's going to go in the bigger pots to stand immediately on the gravel or on the small little terrace area. And then I work down to the smaller tabletop pots and what's going to feature in those and where they're going to be displayed. So I have a rough idea in my head. It all goes a little bit to pot once I start to do it, because then I want far too many things that I'm not going to have room for. But I start with a plan overall.
Yeah. And so physically, how do you do that? Here we do a black and white drawing of each area of the garden, which we have anyway. And then we overlay it with tracing paper or baking parchments, just as good as tracing paper, and often comes in a nice big generous roll. So it's really cheap to do. And we just stick it at the top. And then we'll put each month, from January, February, March, April, May, of what's happening in which particular pot. How do you do it, Tom?
Maybe I should adopt that process. That sounds that sounds quite technical, actually. For me, I draw it on, I start with I knock up a PowerPoint on my laptop of the varieties, basic, so I can see the colours and how I want them, how they'll work together. And then I just have because my garden's quite tiny, I just have a sheet of A4 paper, sometimes 2 sheets of A4 paper with some sellotape down the middle. And then I mark it out where the tables are going to be and what I want then to be on each one. So it's not terribly complicated. It's quite basic, but it works for me. I'm quite a simple soul, so it needs to be very non-technical for me to get the best results.
And do you have to run it past Colin to just check that palette-wise and varieties-wise?
I do, but I think I'm probably quite lucky in the sense we like the same kind of stuff, and he kind of lets me do it. So I'm very grateful for that, because we take over the garden a little bit for filming, and he loves that process. So but he's quite good at the planning bit. He's better at it than I am. So he very often does the drawing and the layout.
Okay.
And I tell him what I want, and then he puts it on paper. So as a duo, we work quite well together for that.
Brilliant. And so what were your big triumphant successes this last spring, so spring 26? And so what are you planning for spring 27?
Well, along with lots of all the normal stuff, one of my stars this year was Ipheion. And I've always kind of thought that of growing sort of in grassy areas, really. And I thought, I'm going to give it a go in pots, because the foliage can look a little bit messy if you're not careful, especially the older, as we work our way through the spring season, the sort of grassy leaves can look a bit messy. But I didn't find that too much this year. And I grew Alberto Castillo, and I also grew Wisley Blue. And both of them were wonderful. They were brilliant in pots. They flowered for over 2 months. I mean, literally, I was so impressed by that. And because they have that lovely, airy, kind of ethereal quality, as I placed them on the tabletops, the flowers sort of mingled through the foliage of other things. So therefore, it looks a nice, complete,
that's such a good
planned
idea.
Bit of chaos.
Yeah.
It really was lovely. So I will definitely be great. And I want to trial more varieties of those.
Brilliant.
So they're definitely going to be in the plan for 27.
Brilliant. And species tulips? Because, I mean, I know previously you've been really keen on different varieties of species tulips for smaller pots rather than the bigger pots. I mean, I know you'll have your big terracottas will have normal hybrid tulips, but it's the species ones you like for the tabletops, isn't it?
Yeah, I love them. And Nora and Danny, both of those two. And I keep coming back to them. I know we introduced them a few years ago, and they just work so well. I mean, the colours are good for terracotta, I find. And they don't get too tall, so they don't topple over. Yeah. Although if they do start to get a little leggy, I just put some hazel twigs in and that's fine. So those two for definite. And then I always grow Sylvestris and Turcus danica together. Last year I had them in a window box, and they were just flowering for quite... I know Turcus danica can be a little short on the flowering side, but they lasted long enough to create a really wowy impression. And that window box was on the front of the house, and I got lots of comments on that, the cheeriness of it. Good. And of course, Sylvestris has the lovely fragrance too. I think that's my favourite, Sylvestris. I love it.
Yeah, I do love Turcus danica, but I find the flowers do go over quickly. But the thing is, for pots and grass, it kind of, in a way, doesn't matter because the seed heads are so handsome. They look like almost like elongated kind of mini pears on a stem. And I actually really love those as a sort of more substantial contrast to very ethereal varieties. I mean, like anemone blanda, I know is something that you really love growing in small pots. And I just find Tulipa Turcus danica with anemone blanda is a lovely combination for almost the upper story seed head of the tulip with the starry white flowers or blue flowers of anemone blanda.
Oh, I think I might try that actually. Together, I think I might do that.
Yeah,
that sounds. I love that idea.
It looked really nice.
You're right. I grow an anemone blanda, and it's just the same one. Blue shades for me is the classic and the best, and I love growing them in the scallop sort of terracotta pots, so ones with scalloped edges, because they just have a nice lax kind of habit that just flops over the side enough to create a very loose and kind of unplanned look. I grow lots of those. And again, they flower for a long time. So it's all about long flowering, having stuff from January right through into May. That's quite important until the later spring, early summer stuff kind of kicks in.
And sort of continuing the theme of seed heads, I think the muscaris, I mean, I love the sort of grape hyacinth, bunch of grapes, flowers of muscaris. But do you know, I often find the seed heads almost as good as the flowers. And again, above something quite delicate and quite sort of flat growing like a Echinodoxa or something like that. Or, they used to be called scillas, didn't they? But having a muscari with them gives you this longevity where you get the muscari flower, but then the seed head, which, as I say, looks sort of graceful in a miniature way, a sort of doll's house size kind of way.
I agree. I think muscari are one of the, I know they have a tendency, or people tend to think they can take over, which of course they can if they're planted in the border, but can be controlled. For me, in pots, they are pure magic. They're so easy to grow. I've never had a failure with muscari. So I go for basic Armeniacum because I like its bigness and the size of flower. And that kind of mid-blue colour is lovely. It's one of my favourites. But then also I tend to go for some of the newer cultivars like Blue Magic. And that one is, gosh, such a winner. I mean, it's so intense. It's a real pop. Brilliant in terracotta pots. Again, little pots as well, because I can dot those in amongst the larger pots on my tabletop. So I get a complete kind of pyramid effect on the top of the table. So I've got a big pot in the middle and then slowly scaling down to smaller ones around the outside, which is what I like. Abundance. It's got to be about abundance.
Yeah. And just to sort of, before we go back to plants again, but just on practicalities like watering and also squirrel protection. So would you, watering wise, would you do much watering of these or really not bother unless there was a drought?
Not at all. So when I plant them in the autumn, and I'm a bit of a late bulb planter, I tend not to do them too early.
Yeah.
So they get a water once I plant them, and then I don't really water again until they start producing. Once I see growth start to come into being in the spring, then I'll start to water. Only if they need it though. And again, I think bulbs are better to have a soak and then allow them to dry out. Don't water them little and often. That's the worst thing. Better to be on the dry side. And I think the drier, the more flowers you get, to be honest.
Yeah.
Squirrels, I never used to have a problem with squirrels really, but the past couple of years, they've really stepped up. And I swear the squirrels look at me when I'm sitting here sometimes, and I saw them flicking the bulbs out of the pots. And that's so annoying. So my fail-proof method really is chicken wire. I don't think I've tried chili, I've tried all sorts. So now we just have a series of chicken wire mesh that's been molded to fit the sizes of pots, and I use them year on year. So I don't buy new every year. I keep them. So once I've planted them, the chicken wire goes on, and to be honest, it's not too unsightly.
But then as soon as the bulbs, because Josie and I just did a podcast on this, and she was saying as soon as the bulbs come up, she was finding, because we have so many pots here, it was quite difficult to get all the chicken wire off in time before the foliage got sort of messed up in the chicken wire. But I guess it's on a smaller scale, that's easier to do, isn't it?
Yeah, really simple.
Yeah.
So and I do allow them to touch the chicken wire before I remove it, as otherwise I find the squirrels are in there again.
Yeah.
But I find that's the best way. It really stopped them.
And obviously with small, tiny pots, it's difficult to do pot toppers, which is what we were recommending, because they're just, I mean, you're talking about sort of like coffee cup size pots, aren't you? A bit deeper.
In some cases,
but in some cases, yeah. And then are there any dwarf narcissus that you would particularly recommend and that you showed on Gardener's World?
I'll always go for minnow. And I know minnow is a really old variety. It's one of our best sellers. And it's quite neat and compact, very delicate, beautifully scented. So I plant extra of that because I like to bring some indoors as well. So these aren't ones that have been forced. They're just literally, once they start to come into flower, I love to bring them in. So I always plant lots of minnow. That is definitely one. I think it's so good. It's unbeatable, really. And another one, I guess, really useful for me is sailboat. Bit bigger, leaves finer, but again, beautifully, a nice, soft, lemony scent. Those two I'd always have.
Yeah, and I love sailboat with perhaps on a, maybe like a trough planter, a narcissus sailboat, probably a muscari, maybe a sort of powdery blue one like Valerie Finis or something like that. And then perhaps one of the scillas again.
Yes.
Either the ice blue variety or a deep blue. And we had a window box in the Chelsea shed here like that last year. And honestly, I mean, it's gone on for decades. We just put it round the back and forget about it until it starts to shoot again in the spring. Totally perennial, but also really lasted and looked good all the whole of spring. So then finally, will you then take them out and store the bulbs, or will you shove the pots with the bulbs inside in the garage, or will you plant them in the garden?
So I tend to do two options here for me. We love narcissi in the border, so Colin tends to plant those out, and it tends to be the border. I do have a border outside of my fence that goes all the way around it. And we've kind of colonised it a little bit, really. So now it's pretty full up.
Yeah, it's Tom's guerrilla garden, and it's absolutely exquisite. Lucky neighbours, I'd say. Anyone who walks past it.
So we drop literally pots of narcissi in as they are. The thing is just getting them in deep enough. That's the only slight issue. So I'll always try and do that with narcissi, but also I give loads away to my friends as well, who gleefully wait for that time of year when I'm about to do that. And I have a queue of people that want to take them off our hands. So I never throw narcissi out, ever. Or muscari, they all get reused. Same with iris reticulatas as well. They all get planted out. Yeah,
fabulous. Thanks, Tom. Well, it is absolutely wonderful. Maybe you'll open your garden for the NGS, Tom, but I guess we perhaps only be able to fit 7 people at a time or something. You'd have to have Colin as the gatekeeper. And anyway, it's a wonderful garden, and Tom and Colin garden it in the most beautiful, exquisite and inspiring way. Thank you, Tom, for chatting about it, and see you soon.
Yes, see you soon. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Grow Cook Eat Arrange, the podcast of me, Sarah Raven, with my guest Tom Stimpson, talking about miniature bulbs that featured in his Gardener's World performance in March this year. Next week, I'm joined by Josie Lewis, our head gardener, and we're going to talk about the trials and tests that we've done on pot toppers, the things that most successfully protect our pot contents against grey squirrel marauders. You can find more information, photos and advice sheets on all the plants and recipes we talk about on this podcast by heading to the show notes or at sarahraven.com/podcast.